A call from a First Coast Connect listener helped prompt Jacksonville's mayor last week to announce the creation of a city task force to examine the soaring cost of childcare. Here to talk about it are four members of the task force: Betty Burney, former Duval County School Board chair and founder and executive director of the I'm a Star Foundation. Good morning, Betty.
Good morning.
Dr. Cheryl Fountain, executive director of the Florida Institute of Education at the University of North Florida. Good morning.
Good morning.
LaTanya Wynn Hall, retired Duval Head Start Executive Director and board member of the Early Learning Coalition Duval. Good morning, LaTanya.
Good morning.
And Yasmina White, advocate and parent leader. Good morning, Yasmina.
Hi, good morning.
So, Yasmina, I'm glad that you could be with us today because your interest was really foundational to the creation of this task force. You called this program back in May during our monthly Ask the Mayor segment. Let's take a listen.
The point of my call today is really to see if you have any interest in creating a child care task force. There's so many families our day and age that are struggling to find affordable, quality child care, and I believe that that would be something that is prudent to your citizens of today in terms of just being able to know that that's front of mind and that you identify that this is something that many people are impacted by.
Listen, I think it's a great idea, and we've had many of these discussions. If you're someone who would like to be involved in something like that, I would love to speak with you. It certainly is an issue for a lot of families.
So, Yasmina, after that, the mayor's office had asked us for your contact information. Tell us a little bit about what happened and how we got to this point from there.
So, first off, I want to thank the Deegan administration for taking this on, and Mayor Deegan for taking my call and knowing that this is an issue that people face in Jacksonville. Um, I brought this to the table because I know that we're in a childcare crisis, not just in the state of Florida, but across the country, but here in Jacksonville. And more, I realize that there are families struggling. I've gone through this twice already with two young little girls. What I was paying for 12 years ago, I was recently just paying for a kid in VPK just for wraparound care. She had the 3-hour VPK state voucher, but then I had to pay for the rest of the hours because I'm a working mom. And if we don't have access to childcare, it impacts everybody in the workforce, not just one or the other.
And so, when you reached out and made that initial request, what is it that you're thinking looking at this issue might accomplish?
Well, I'm looking for real investment, and I mean investment with dollars. We need to be treating childcare, early childhood education as a public good and not as a private burden. Again, it impacts the workforce, it impacts everybody. This is a bipartisan issue, it's not one or the other. We all utilize the childcare system, we all need it to make a living.
LaTanya, I want to ask you and put some numbers to this to kind of get the conversation going. We know that in Florida, parents are just spending an incredible amount on childcare. For infants, the average annual cost is between $11,000 and $13,000 a year. It's around $8,000 for preschoolers. Parents are paying, on average $1,000 a month, and that is in Florida way more than the cost of in-state college tuition on average. So what we're seeing for parents is just untenable costs for a lot of them. I mean, they're just really, it's not an affordable system.
Well, and that's for the parents that can't afford it. And so my entire career was for the families that could not afford it, which are the Head Start families who are poor, and it's an income eligible program. So, but they still deserve quality also. So when you look at those child care rates, which I cringe when I say child care because it's early childhood education, that is, you have to have a workforce to pay for that quality for those ones that are paying the $1,000 a month. But then you also need to have that same quality for the ones that are in federally funded programs that there is no cost because in 5 years they will be entering the public school system and they all need to be able to learn to read because by that third grade they are ready for you to read to learn, and you cannot read to learn unless you learn to read. So I say the value of birth to 5 has to be just as important as the value of K to 12.
And what in your career was the disparity or the perceptions of disparity between, you know, a paid early education and some of the programs that were federally funded? Was that a problem?
It was well, when you look at the resources, the materials, the teachers, and so when Head Start mandated that the teachers had to have, a AA degree or a BA degree, you have to pay for that. Where when I first started, it was just a child care CDA, Development Association credential. So once you start mandating degrees to get the quality of teaching, then you have to pay them a working wage, where I would have teachers to say, "I can work at Walmart or Amazon and make more than what I'm making here with all of the expectations that are of me in the classroom." So it's a early childhood education issue, but also a workforce issue.
And Betty Burney, what is it that I mean, people she mentioned wages, and that is a real thing. We know that the wage disparity between the average childcare employee, they're paid on average about $16, $17 an hour. Other occupations is closer to 30 when you're
Mhm.
kind of mixing in on average. And so that is a huge disparity. What does that do to, first of all, just the availability of childcare, and parent choice?
Before I answer that, I have to say kudos to Yasmina for getting this started, and kudos to the mayor for listening because it makes a huge difference. Um, the major issue that I see, and especially coming from a school board background, is that if we're unable to get a trained workforce through the school system also, because we can do a lot of things through the school system. We have some of the supports there, but if we're unable to get a trained workforce, what we're going to actually end up with is a system where you can't find teachers for the vast amount of children that we have. We already heard while we were in the task force meeting that there is a demand, the number of children far exceed what is available. But a lot of the unavailability has to do with the fact, as Latoya said, you cannot find the workforce sometimes because it's easier to go to somewhere else to do it.
And for parents who are living in this environment right now, Cheryl, I mean, as Latanya says, there's kind of childcare and the need that exists around just what working families have to have, somebody to take care of their children. And then this shift towards early childhood education. That's something that the state really took up a few years back when it instituted its VPK program, its voluntary pre-K education program. Why is that not a solution in this case when we're talking about early childhood education?
Right. I think the shift from childcare to early learning
Mm.
is huge. It's a cultural shift. It's changing a mindset.
Mhm.
And that is not only changing the mindset of those of us who work in that system, but it's also changing the mindset of the public and businesses. What I see happening is a shift is being made. The Jacksonville Civic Council, for example, which is made up of business people, took on, or still taking, hasn't solved it, early learning, quality early learning as an issue. The challenge that we have with where we are is that uh, the shift actually started in Florida with Governor Jeb Bush when we passed what was called the School Readiness Act. And it formally shifted the name from child care, which was housed in children and families, to early learning and created a separate sector. That was monumental in terms of a shift in policy. Unfortunately, there was not a shift in funding to match the shift in policy. So we have what happened in that shift. We ended up with a very fragmented system, both in funding and in quality. And it's a historical antecedent. And in order for us to now get to the 21st century, we need to shift. And if we believe, which we have a lot of lip service for, that education is important, then we also need to then make a shift in, thank you, ma'am, for funding so that in fact the children, all children, irrespective of which neighborhood they live in,
Mhm.
have access to quality. If we don't, if our children do not, and the birth to 5 is the most critical time for brain development. 85% of our brains are developed by age 3, 90% by age 5. If our children enter school unprepared, which now we have about 50% of our children entering unprepared, then the gap widens as they enter kindergarten. And it's manifested when you look at the grade 3
Mhm.
reading scores, where we have last spring, we had 18 elementary schools where 75% of our children could not read at grade level.
If you're just joining us, we're talking to 4 members of the newly created Child Care Solutions Task Force. If you are paying for childcare or have suggestions for the task force, you can join our conversation by calling 904-549-2937. You can email firstcoastconnect at wjct.org, or you can reach out on Facebook, Instagram, or X at FCC On Air. We've got a call from Richard in downtown Jacksonville. Good morning, Richard. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you so much for taking my call. Thank you for this task force. Betty Burney, I love you dearly. I've been obviously aware of your work for years. At my wife and I, when she was pregnant with my son, this 25, 26 years ago, we measured up the cost of childcare, and it was cheaper for her to stay home and raise our 2 children, and she was a stay-at-home mom for 4 years. And that was 25 years ago. We are in the exact same situation. Earlier, one of your guests mentioned about how Governor Bush changed the title. And we get a lot of lip service from our politicians. Task force, change the name, and then we turn around and we cut taxes. We just had $13 million flushed away from our budget under the guise of lowering property taxes, and now we're talking about child care. If we had invested that same $13 million in child care, knowing that child care early investments return, 16 times, that's like $208 million. We definitely need to change this conversation from lowering taxes to invest in our children. And if we can start getting politicians and leaders who see that, I think we'll begin to start seeing a real cultural shift.
Richard, thanks for your comments. I appreciate it. One of his comments, and I've heard this, and it's something that I experienced in my own career, is sort of this calculation. Is it worth it to pay for childcare, or should a parent, if they have that flexibility, consider, staying at home with the child, or shifting their schedule in some way so that they're able to kind of balance childcare with a family member and not pay for it. But of course, that is not without cost, Yasmina. And, one of the costs is career advancement for women if they're the ones who decide that they're going to take that step back. It's Social Security when they're older, and wages that they didn't earn and then are not paid out. It's, all kinds of opportunities that could lead to additional economic security. And it's a cost for just kind of productivity in the workforce. So while people are making that calculation on their own level, it is something that comes with a variety of other costs down the way.
hmm Yeah, statistics show and data show that women often are at the forefront of withdrawing from their careers or putting their educational degrees on hold. They are staying home with their kids because it is more cost effective to stay home with their kid because childcare is just too unaffordable. And to piggyback on what she mentioned about lip service and the lack of funding, we have private school vouchers that are being funded at the K to 12 level, $9,000 for kids to do homeschool, for kids to go to private schools. If they can invest in K to 12 education, they can invest in childcare. It's a matter of what they want to do versus what they can do.
Betty, I want to ask you just about the VPK arrangement, because that was obviously designed to kind of help fill this need for early childhood education, but it has limits. It is a 3-hour a day program. And for most working parents, that is not only not super useful, it's actually really hard to accommodate. If you're trying to drop off a kid from, for a 9 o'clock class and pick them up at noon, you have blown a big hole in your day. It's not something that you can easily accommodate.
It is not, and I think that whoever thought of the concept should have spoken with a true task force who understands exactly what's going on. 3 or 4 hours, but then if a mom or dad are working for 8 hours, then you're still going to have to come out of your pocket because you have to pay for those wraparound services.
Mhm.
You have to make sure that your child is going to have sufficient knowledge and all of those things. So during that wraparound service time, are they getting the knowledge, the information that they need in order for them to move forward? What's happening with them then? I think that if we say that we are the richest country in the world, we need to truly step up and look at our future. Um, I'm a consultant for the Center for the Reform of School Systems. There was a city in Texas called Spring Branch. There, the reason that they boosted all of their academic achievement is because they literally looked at early childhood learning and found out what the jobs were going to be 20 years from then, and they worked their children through that system. But they had an excellent early learning system, and we have to do that. We're going to just have to bite the bullet. The late James Baldwin said, "For these are all our children. We will either pay for or profit by what they become."
Mm. Latanya, I wonder if you think that the tide is turning in any way. I mean, we've seen with the recent election of the new New York mayor, Zohran Mamdani, he ran in part on a pledge of universal affordable childcare. We've seen in New Mexico that they have started subsidizing, in addition to college tuition, childcare, and that's going to vary a great deal in terms of what it costs. I think in New Mexico, they think it's going to cost around $600 million to pay for early childhood education. In New York, it's closer to $6 billion a year for that same thing. So obviously costs could be enormous. Is that the kind of thing that you would like to see come out of this task force that you're working on?
Anything good that comes out is a benefit. But I'm sorry, I have to get the VPK was started for the working home moms to give them a break. So just let me say that. Okay. So that's why the 3 hours. Give these stay at home moms a break for 3 hours. That was VPK. That is not what VPK is for. It's for working moms, not stay at home moms that need a 3 hour break. So, but with that, at least there's a start. And
Interesting. So you think that this was sort of started more as like a
yeah,
kind of a
3
benefit
three,
for
3 hours for stay at home
more
moms
affluent
to give them a
families?
break for
Mhm.
3 hours.
And
Yes.
what do you base that on? Well, I mean, I don't even
Yeah.
recall that debate, but
Well, when you've been, I guess I've been in it for over 30 years. So when you know the history and when you
Mhm.
know just that's how it started. That
Okay.
this conversation started. And so stay at my home moms need a break. And so, 3 hours is a good break.
Okay.
And then it just shifted into voluntary pre-K, which is the 3 hours. And you can't learn, especially birth to 5, in 3 hours. In 3 hours. So the fact that New York and I applaud them, I commend them, but it has to be universal everywhere and for all children. And that's why I keep saying all children. It's like I have told every superintendent that I have had the privilege to speak to since I've been here for 30 years is that they're coming to your schools. They're coming to your school, no matter what neighborhood, no matter across the bridge, across the railroad tracks, they're coming to your school. Please make sure all children are prepared. And quality is the word. No more big mama's house. No more babysitters. No more childcare. It's early learning to prepare for lifelong learning for all children.
If you have thoughts or questions for this new city task force into child care solutions, early learning solutions, as my guests would have me say, please give us a call. We're at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Cheryl, I want to ask you just about there is actually some historical precedent for childcare, and it dates back to World War II. There was
Mhm.
something called the Lanham Act, which during, the build
Right.
up to World War II, and when women were required to be in the workforce, the federal government said, "Hey, let's find a way for these women to be able to
That
accommodate
is
work."
correct.
And they created this $20 million national program, and all of a sudden there was universal childcare for women who were working at that time.
Right. And that's and then when World War II ended, so did that program.
Mm.
So it did not continue. It resurrected, uh, and it was a workforce issue actually in 1960 with President Johnson's War on Poverty. That's actually where Head Start
Yeah.
had its antecedents.
Mhm.
And it was considered a workforce issue and a health issue. That's why it's in the Health and Human Services at the federal level. It's not in education. And what brain research and cognitive science has taught us over the last 50 years is that the most important investment we can make for the future success of children is birth to 5 and then 5 to grade 3.
Mhm.
Without that continuum of learning to read, which is a prerequisite for mathematics, for science, for computer science, for any d- imaginable career, or what AI will end up helping us figure out, is reading. And so, and reading is not in front of a computer. So you have to go to what the research says works best for young children. And best for young children is experiences, high quality conversations with teachers, building vocabulary, building their language skills, which means you're reading to them through shared reading and interactive reading. That is the kind of experience that then prepares them when they get to kindergarten, where formal reading actually begins. So, what reading science tells us is there's two big clumps. Clump one is language, and clump two is the skills that you need in order to read. You got to have both. And we're missing out by and large with our birth to 5 students in the language comprehension, concept development, background knowledge, and having conversations and experiences. Children learn through their 5 senses, not through just sight.
We've got a call from Neil in St. Augustine. Good morning, Neil. Go ahead.
It's Nell.
I'm sorry, Nell. Go
Um,
ahead.
no problem. We moved I married a European and lived in Europe for 32 years, and our children were born in Germany, but we moved to Belgium, to Brussels, in 1980. And I was very surprised to learn what they do with their children, because a lot of the Belgian women need to work. Certainly at that time, both of the parents really needed to work. That once the child was born, the mother would get 6 weeks off before the birth and 6 weeks off afterwards. If they did not have another way to take care of the child, they had a system where the children went into a creche and they were there up until the age of 2.5. At 2.5, they went into the maternelle, which I guess you'd sort of call preschool here. And my children were in the system from the ages of 2.5, 3.5 for my son, and later from 2.5 for 8 years in the Belgian school system. And the nice thing is that the mothers didn't have to worry about, what am I going to do? There is a system that's there. Everything was sort of state run. Of course, Belgium is not a huge country. But the thing is that they cared about the children. In addition, there were also payments that if you had children, you would receive a monthly stipend of, I can't remember exactly how much it was, because of the fact that you had children. So they certainly cared about the family and the children, and it would be lovely if the U.S. and certainly if you're looking at the local level, that Jacksonville could look at that as well.
No, thanks so much for sharing your experience. We also have an email from Ricardo. He says, first of all, congratulations to Yasmina for taking the initiative and staying involved. She is a model of good citizenship. And kudos to the mayor for responding by putting together this task force of what appears are exceptional leaders. Love to hear about solutions and not only problems. Um, Betty, I want to ask you what your thoughts were when you were asked to join this task force. I mean, obviously, you bring a very rich background in early learning, formal schooling through the Duval County school system, but also your advocacy on behalf of young people in Jacksonville for many years.
The minute that I received the email, I responded right then, yes, because I've seen what happens when when children do not get that formal learning from birth to 5. That academic achievement gap is real, and it starts there and it just widens because the children are coming into a system where they're already behind. One of the reasons that I started the I'm a Star Foundation is because when I would go from school to school, there were some children, if I walked into those classrooms, they were reading like wizards. There were others who were struggling. And that shouldn't be, because we are educating what is called the Google generation. They have been dubbed as perhaps the most innovative and creative ever. So why is it that we have some kids, some schools, some places where children can barely read, let alone comprehend what's going on? And so I'm happy that this task force says 90 days, which means we have 90 days to get to work and 90 days to truly come up with something. I was elated when I went into the meeting. I got out of the meeting, called my sister, and said, of all the meetings that I've gone to, and I've gone to many, this was the best one.
Cheryl, I want to ask you that same question because, I mean, like Betty, you have been in education and looking for education
Right.
solutions for decades.
Yes.
3 decades, probably.
Yes.
Um,
That's a good statement.
yeah. And so, there have been periodic initiatives, enthusiasm, support. And a lot of times, a task force ends up with a report on a shelf somewhere. Or,
Most times.
yeah. So, what makes you optimistic, willing to join this effort, and hopeful that it will achieve something?
I am too with Betty. I have served on many task force, and I can look at many reports that have collect dust. Where I think Jacksonville is right now is at a nexus for possibility. We have a mayor who is supportive, which is one of the first things that we need. We have in our city, which is unlike many cities, uh, the major uh, early learning agencies have a long history of collaboration. The Kids Hope Alliance, the Early Learning Coalition, FIE, United Way, DCPS. There's a long history of them working together, which in many cities they argue with each other. So we have a mayor, we have that. For the first time, we have real strong support from the business community, from the Jacksonville Civic Council.
And there is a member, we should say, of the Civic Council on this task force. But the Civic Council, for people who aren't familiar, is,
Yes.
kind of a coalition of leaders and business leaders and thought leaders, and kind of often very influential in political
Correct.
change.
And their goal is to make Jacksonville the destination of choice. And what they realized is one of their 4 initiatives is high quality early learning in order to make that happen. So that is an added piece to it. And we have families who are willing to do their part in helping their children and are ready to do that. And the last group we have, which is the delivery service of early learning, which is fragmented. It's made up of not for profit, for business, for profit only. The school systems have things, classrooms. So that group is also willing to work together. Now, what we have to have from this task force, which is my hope, is that we develop some out of the box recommendations that have teeth in them that actually impact 2 things: the cost of early learning and the quality of actually 3. I lied. The cost of early learning, the quality of early learning, and the access so that it's true in all neighborhoods across our city.
We did get a call. Margot didn't want to be on, but she's from Palm Coast, and she said she was a VPK teacher. A big problem for retaining is a low salary.
Right.
Yasmina, I'm going to give you the last word here, since this is sort of your creation. What are you hoping to? This is a process that has just begun. You've got 120 days, this task force, to come up with solutions.
So, first thing is it being front of mind, starting the conversations, being in the right rooms with people to find solutions. Second thing, some type of investment. What that investment could be, I'm not sure yet. Everything costs money, especially childcare, but really identifying and talking about the fact that people cannot afford it. I know we did not touch on it. We mainly talked about VPK, but that newborn to 4-year-old, newborn to 3 years old is still not affordable, even with a voucher. Parents are struggling. Their bills say they cannot afford it. The qualifications for 3 and 4 children or 2 children and their income still does not allow them to afford it. And the third thing is childcare accessibility is inaccessible in Jacksonville. We learned at the task force that we have more children in this city than childcare centers that can serve them. So we need access in every zip code.
All right. Well, we're going to have to leave it there. Dr. Cheryl Fountain, Betty Burney, Yasmina White, and Latanya, I have your last name in there.
Winhall.
Winhall. I'm sorry. It wasn't in my script. I apologize. And I know you're going to work on changing the name of that task force from Childcare Solutions to something else. We'll see what it ends up. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for
Thank
having
you.
us.